Dimitri here, founder of Just Reach Out. Today we're going to look at the guest posting, contributor accounts, as well as podcast search. Now, whether you want to be a guest on a podcast or whether you want to contribute to another publication, we have two different tools for you to apply and get in contact with those podcasters or those publications. Now, these categories that you will pick from are driven by our customers. The way it works is, as a customer, you request a category, and this is created not by a machine, but by a team of editors on our end. And what happens is, when you say you selected podcast, so you want to be a guest on a podcast. Your topic is business, so you're a businessman, you're a woman, you know a lot about business. And you have something extraordinary to share with these podcasters, right? What we do is we create a list of podcasts that are actively accepting guests right now. And we give you the email address, the number of episodes for each podcast, the date of the last episode, and the podcast name, and a bit about the podcast itself as you scroll down. The name of the game here is to be value add and quality, very targeted, versus a one-to-many approach. Hey, I'm a business expert, please interview me. That's not going to fly. And in fact, when we ask you to write an actual email, we will try and get you to write actual topics you want to talk about and where you've been mentioned before. Because guess what? If you haven't been on any podcast ever, it's not the end of the world, but you probably shouldn't be going after those top podcasts. You should probably be looking at podcasts that maybe have 10 episodes out there or 15, not 200, right? And that kind of gives you a popularity take on what that podcast, how popular that one podcast is, right? So this is the pitch templates that you fill out. You can see that you're supposed to list some of your impressive accomplishments and your past podcast interviews. In here, of course, we have the scheduled follow-ups that you can add in here, and we always recommend you add at least a few of these if somebody doesn't reply to you in a few weekdays. That's the podcast tool, the podcast outreach tool. Again, I would say quality over quantity. Look at the number of episodes on each podcast and really look at the date of the last episode to try and figure out, hey, is this podcast somewhat recent? Is this really, really popular? And guess what? If there's not that many podcast episodes, chances are it might not be as popular. And you always have their URL. So you can always go and take a look at that podcast to see how recent that podcast is. Now, if you want a new category, you can always open up a chat and just ask us to create a new category for you. If you want more podcasts for this specific category, you can always click this button. This is done within 24 to 48 hours. These lists are made by our editors. And if you have any questions about them or you want to fine-tune them, you can always chat with us live. We can always work with you to create the most relevant list for you. In terms of submitting yourself, become a contributor to the publication, the process is very simple and it's very similar to what we just saw. You select a category out of this list. Now, if that category doesn't exist, there's always the chat button. You can always chat with us. And again, we'll create that category for you, right? In here, for example, I selected Bitcoin blogs. You can see the domain rating because we're going after blogs. Now, our editors are creating lists of blogs who are accepting writers to write for them. And that's the big thing is a lot of times you don't know if they're accepting people to write for them. This is blogs that are looking for somebody. And if you qualify, guess what? You should apply. For those who are worried about what kind of links these blogs give you, we have a tag here saying, what kind of links they do follow or do not follow. Domain rating between 1 and 100 tells you how popular that blog is. And again, when you're applying to a blog, apply to those lower ones if you don't have anything that you've written before. Because guess what? In your pitch, You're going to say, I write extensively on, and you're going to include a link. And guess what? If that's just your company blog where you've been writing for, probably it's going to be hard to convince a domain authority of 50 or 70 to say, hey, we'd love for you to write for us, because they haven't seen you write anywhere else but your own blog, right? So you're going to need to work on that. You're going to need to start applying to lower domain authorities 20s and 30s, and then start applying to those higher ones as well. Now, all that email, works exactly the same way. These are custom curated by our team, so the email addresses we know are very much up to date. If there's any problems, our team always human verifies these email addresses and corrects them, right? But that's the guest contributor tool in a nutshell, together with the podcast outreach tool. Together, I think you need to, if you've never been on a podcast or guest post, you need to go after lower ones, and you can sort these by domain rating and by the number of episodes on the podcast, and then build yourself up to 40s and 50s and so forth. By all means, if you've already been writing or you've been featured somewhere, jump to 40s and 50s. You already have some credibility, some street cred, and you have some really interesting blog topics. Take a look at the blog itself. Take a look at the podcast. Get a feel for what this blog covers, right? And then submit something that's very thought-provoking for that publication. So that's the guest posting and podcasts.